Quick video today on polynomial classification and operations. I say it's quick because I'm going to try to go pretty fast. This is all topics that you should have seen in Math 2. And so we're just going to go over each as a quick review. All right. A lot of U tries today. I think we have about 4 U tries because we do have a lot of different topics. But again, we're skimming through each one. So first, let's talk about classifications. There are two different things that we look at when we're trying to classify a polynomial. Okay, the first thing we're going to look at is the degree. Remember that the degree is the biggest exponent that the polynomial has. So for example, on this first polynomial, because I see an exponent of 2, an exponent of 1, and this one doesn't even have an exponent, so it'd be an exponent of 0. The biggest exponent that we have in this case is of degree 2. So if I look at something of degree 2, I would say that this is called a quadratic something, okay? If I look at the next one, this is of degree 4 because the biggest exponent is 4. So because it's a degree 4, I would call it a quartic, okay? A quartic something, all right? So first, you're going to look at the biggest exponent that the polynomial has, and then that's going to let you know whether to call it a linear, a quadratic, a cubic, or a quartic. By the way, a linear would look something like this. Notice that it has an exponent of 1, and so that's why we would call it a linear in that case. But don't worry about it. Let's just go ahead and just keep going. The next thing you're going to look at is the number of terms. The number of terms is how many quantities are being separated by either an addition or a subtraction symbol. So in this case, I see that this thing has 1, 2, 3 different terms. So this is a trinomial because there are 3 terms in this thing. And for this one only has 1 term in it, right? It's not separated by an addition or subtraction. So we call that a monomial. So let's backtrack a little bit. Let's talk about this one again. We're going to use both names now. First, you're going to go off the degree, and then you're going to go off the number of terms. So because this has a degree 2, I know it's a quadratic. And because this thing has 3 terms, I know it's a trinomial. So I'm going to call this a quadratic trinomial. Let's take a look at the next one. Same thing. First, we look at the degree. I know it's a degree 4, so I'm going to call it a quartic. And then because there's only 1 term in it, it's a quartic monomial. Go ahead and try it on the next one. Press pause on the video, see what you get. I'm going to assume you already did that. So let's see. This has a biggest term of 3. So degree of 3, we call it a cubic. And because there are 2 terms in it, then I call it a binomial. This is going to be a cubic binomial. Hopefully you did well on that and you understand how to classify or how to give these things names, right? That's it for classification. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. The next thing we're going to look at is adding polynomials. And adding polynomials, all you got to do is combine like terms. So because we're adding and subtracting, or adding 2 different polynomials in this case, all we really have to do is combine like terms. I can ignore the parentheses when the 2 polynomials are being separated by an addition symbol. You can basically just drop the parentheses and combine like terms. So let's see. I know that 8x squared will combine with a 2x squared because they have the same exponent. I also know that a negative 5x to the 4th will combine with this negative 2x to the 4th. And I know that this negative 2x cubed will combine with this positive 4x cubed. Now here's the thing. The standard practice in mathematics is to write this in standard form. That means to write the biggest exponent first. So I'm going to start with the biggest exponent, which in this case is going to be 4. That means I'm going to combine the negative 5x to the 4th with negative 2x to the 4th. Negative 5 minus 2 is a negative 7, so this becomes negative 7x to the 4th. Now I'm going to look at the next highest term, which is the next highest degree, which is 3. So let's see, I got a negative 2 here and a positive 4 here. Negative 2 plus 4 becomes a plus 2. And these are x cubes. And then on the last one, I'm going to look for the next highest degree, which is going to be the squareds. And in this case, I have an 8 that's positive plus a 2 that's positive. 8 plus 2 becomes 10. So a positive 10 of these x squareds. All right, you go ahead and try the next one. I'm going to go ahead and assume that you pressed pause on the video and you already did that. I'm going to go ahead and combine like terms. So let's see. I see. Let's go in order, right? 6x to the fourth, that's the biggest exponent I have, and I do see a matching partner over here. 6 minus 3, that's going to be a positive 3, x to the fourth. The next thing I would look for are x cubes, but I don't see any x cubes. After the x cubes, I would look for x squareds. I do see x squareds. I see 1x squared over here, plus another 1x squared over here. That's a 1 plus 1, which ends up being plus 2x squareds. Next thing I would look for are regular x's. I don't see those. And then finally, at the very end, I would look for constants. And I do see this constant of 9, this constant of 11. That's a 9 plus 11, which becomes a plus 20. And I think that's it. If we were to name this thing, it would be a quartic trinomial, because the biggest exponent is 4. And there's 3 things in it, okay? I didn't mention this for this last one, and I really should have. If it has a degree 4, we call it a quartic. But if it has 4 items in it, right, we call it a polynomial. Poly means just a lot, many, okay? Many nomial, many terms. In fact, if it had 5 things, we would call it a polynomial. If you had 6 things, you would call it a polynomial. If it had 7 things, we'd call it a polynomial. At some point, we just give up naming it, and we just say, hey, anything 4 or more, it's going to be a polynomial, okay? So good to know, all right? All right, subtracting polynomials, we are going to distribute the negative, and then we're going to combine them almost like we're adding them, okay? So this, when you're doing that, notice that this doesn't have a symbol in front of it, so technically it's a positive. If it has a positive, you don't have to do anything with it. But because this polynomial has a negative in front of it, we need to do the opposite of everything that's in here. That's what that negative really means, is to take the opposite. So that means I'm going to distribute this negative, and everything's going to flip. So instead of a positive 8x cubed, it's going to flip to a negative. Instead of a negative 6, it's going to flip to a positive, because a negative times a negative becomes a positive. And same thing here, because this is a negative, now we're going to flip it to a positive. Remember, negative times a positive becomes a negative, so that's why this one flipped to a negative. All right. What do I do with this one? You leave it exactly the way it is. So I'm just going to go ahead and combine these terms. This is going to be 5 plus 5x cubed plus 2x squared. Nothing happens on this one, but on this one, I'm going to distribute this negative. So I'm going to take this negative right here, and it's going to distribute here. Negative times a positive, that becomes a negative 8x cubed. A negative times a negative, that becomes a positive 6. And then a negative times a negative, that becomes a positive 4x squared. Now, it's just a regular addition problem like we did before, and we're going to go ahead and combine like terms. I'm going to go in order again. I'm going to look for the biggest exponent I have, and in this case, the biggest exponent I have is the cubics. So I got 5 of these x cubes here, and then I'm going to subtract 8 of them. 5 minus 8 gives me a negative 3x cubed. I look for the next biggest exponent, and looks like it's going to be powers of 2. I got a positive 2x squared here and a positive 4x squared here. 2 plus a 4, that's going to give me a positive 6x squared. The next thing I would look for is x's, but I don't see anything. And then finally, I would look for constants, which I see a positive 5 with a positive 6. 5 plus 6, that gives me a positive 11. This looks like a cubic trinomial to me. Go ahead and try it on the next one. Notice that you're subtracting, so you are going to have to go ahead and flip those signs on the second polynomial. I'm going to assume that you already pressed pause on the video and that you tried it, so I'm going to go really fast through this one. I just jot down everything that I have on the first one. And then I take this negative and I flip everything in here, so that becomes a positive 7x cubed. A negative 3x. And a positive 10x squared. We're going to go ahead and combine like terms. Biggest exponent I see are these two. And actually, when you have a negative 7 plus a 7, that becomes 0x cubed. And if it's 0, I don't need to write it, right? So that's gone. The next thing I look for is x squareds. I see 11 here. I see 10 here. That's an 11 plus 10, which is a 21x squared. Next thing I look for are x's. And I see these negative 3x's here, and there's nothing to combine it with, so I just bring it down. Negative 3x. And then finally, I bring down the plus 15, and that should be your final answer. All right, moving right along. We're almost at the end. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to multiply polynomials. The way you multiply polynomials is you distribute each term and then you combine. All right, so we're going to keep distributing until I'm done distributing each term from the first polynomial. In this case, the binomial 8x plus 2. So let me start by distributing the 8x first. Notice that there's no symbol in between. This is when you distribute. A lot of times I see students try to distribute here, but there's a plus in between. That just means combine like terms. Here, however, there is no symbol in between. This is when you're supposed to go ahead and distribute. So I'm going to distribute the 8x until I cannot distribute it anymore. So I'm going to distribute the 8x times 3x squared. 8 times 3 is 24. X times x squared is x to the third power. Am I done distributing the 8x? Heck no, so I'm going to keep doing it. 8x times 4x. 8 times 4 is a positive 32. X times x is x squared. Am I done distributing the 8x? Almost. I'm going to distribute it one more time. So 8x times negative 5. 8 times negative 5 is negative 40, and I bring along the x for the ride. Am I done distributing the 8x? Yes. Am I done distributing? No. Now that I'm done distributing the 8x, the next thing I'm going to do is now I'm going to distribute the 2, and I'm going to do it just like I did last time. So I'm going to distribute the 2 to every single term on the other side. So first I'm going to start off with 2 times 3x squared. That gives me a positive 6x squared. Am I done distributing the 2? Nope, not yet. So I'm going to go 2 times 4x. 2 times 4x gives me a positive 8x. Am I done distributing the 2? Nope, not yet. So 2 times negative 5. That gives me a negative 10. Am I done distributing the 2? Yes. Am I done distributing everything in the first polynomial? Yes. So it looks like I'm done with my distribution. Now that you're done distributing, all you're going to do is combine like terms. So I'm going to look for the highest exponent, which is 24x cubed. And I don't see any more x cubed, so I'm just going to bring it down. That's going to be 24x cubed. The next thing I look for are x squared. So let's see. I see a 32x squared here. And I see a 6x squared here. 32 plus 6 gives me a 38x squared. Now that I'm done with the x squareds, the next thing I move on to are the regular x's. I see a negative 40x here and a positive 8x here. Negative 40 plus 8, that gives me a negative 32x. And this negative 10 doesn't have anything to combine it with, so I just bring it down, and that is my final answer. Notice that when I wrote this, because I went from biggest exponent to lowest exponent, this is already in standard form. Take a minute, go ahead and pause the video, do this last one. I'm going to assume you already did that, so I'm going to jam through this one. We're going to go ahead and distribute the 5x till I can't distribute it anymore. That's going to be 30x squared. 5x times negative 1 gives me a negative 5x. It looks like I'm done distributing the 5x. So now I move on to distributing the 3. 3 times 6x, that's a positive 18x. I'm not done distributing the 3, so 3 times negative 1, that gives me a negative 3. I'm done distributing the 3. I'm done distributing. Last thing I need to do is combine like terms. Start with the biggest exponent. I see a 30x squared. There's nothing to combine it with, so I'm just going to write 30x squared. Next thing, I look for the next biggest exponent. That's going to be x to the first. I see a negative 5x there and an 18x here. Negative 5 plus 18, that's a positive 13x. And the negative 3 does not combine anything, so I leave it as a negative 3. All right, guys, lots of different topics, but again, it's mostly review from last year, so hopefully a lot of this stuff is, you've seen it, right? You know what's going on. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.